Behind Hollywood's most legendary leading man lay secrets that would shock even his biggest fans. From accidentally being listed as female on his birth certificate to Adolf Hitler placing a bounty on his head during WWII, the King of Hollywood lived a life stranger than any script. Clark Gable's famous smile hid dentures that gave him terrible breath, while his masculine image concealed a germophobia so extreme he built portable showers and refused to take baths. Here are 15 things you never knew about Clark Gable. Fact 1. Born female on paper. When William Clark Gable entered the world on February 1, 1901, in the small town of Cadiz, Ohio, his parents got quite a surprise when they saw his birth certificate. Despite clearly being a baby boy, the official document listed their newborn son as female, creating a bureaucratic mix-up that would follow the future Hollywood legend for years to come. The error on Gable's birth certificate wasn't just a simple clerical mistake that could be easily overlooked or quickly corrected. In 1901, official records were much more permanent and difficult to change than they are today, meaning this gender classification error became part of his permanent legal documentation. The mistake likely occurred because birth registrations were often filled out hastily by overworked clerks who may have misheard information or simply marked the wrong box on the form. What makes this bureaucratic blunder even more interesting is that it wasn't discovered until much later in Gable's life, long after he had already become one of Hollywood's biggest stars. The error came to light when Gable needed his birth certificate for official purposes, possibly related to his military service during World War II or for other legal documentation required by the film studios. This wasn't the only confusion surrounding Gable's birth records either. His original name was probably William Clark Gable, but various birth registrations, school records, and other official documents from his early life actually contradict each other about his exact name and other details. The inconsistencies in his paperwork created a trail of administrative confusion that followed him throughout his life. The gender mix-up on his birth certificate became one of those quirky Hollywood trivia facts that fans and biographers would later find amusing, especially considering how Gable would go on to become the ultimate symbol of masculine appeal and earn the nickname the King of Hollywood. The irony wasn't lost on anyone that the man who would become famous for his rugged masculinity and charm with the ladies had officially started life listed as female in the government records. Fact 2. Studio boss called him an ape. Before Clark Gable became the King of Hollywood, one of the most powerful executives in the film industry delivered a crushing blow that nearly destroyed his acting dreams before they could even begin. Darryl F. Zanuck, a top executive at Warner Brothers Studio, took one look at the young aspiring actor and declared that his ears were too big and he looked like an ape, effectively rejecting him from what could have been his first major studio contract. This devastating rejection came during Gable's early struggles in Hollywood, when he was desperately trying to land any kind of meaningful role that could launch his career. Zanuck was known throughout the industry as someone whose opinion carried enormous weight, and his harsh assessment of Gable's physical appearance was exactly the kind of feedback that could end an actor's hopes of making it in the movie business. The comment about looking like an ape was particularly brutal, since Hollywood in those days was obsessed with finding leading men who fit very specific standards of conventional handsomeness. What made Zanuck's rejection even more significant was that it highlighted one of Gable's most noticeable physical features that would continue to be a source of concern throughout his early career. His prominent ears were indeed something that casting directors and studio executives frequently commented on, and many people in the industry felt they were too large and distracting for him to be considered leading man material. The ears issue was so persistent that Gable would later undergo surgery to have them pinned back, showing just how much these early rejections affected his confidence and career trajectory. Fortunately for Gable and for movie history, this harsh dismissal from Warner Brothers didn't end his story. He eventually found his way to MGM, where different executives saw past his unconventional features and recognized the raw charisma and screen presence that would make him one of cinema's greatest stars. The irony of Zanuck's comment became even more pronounced as Gable went on to become the epitome of masculine appeal in Hollywood. Fact 3. Teeth infection almost killed him. In June of 1933, Clark Gable was rushed to a private hospital with a life-threatening medical emergency that would forever change his famous smile and nearly cost him his life. The future star was suffering from a severe gum infection called pyorrhea, a condition so serious that doctors told him he would have died without immediate medical intervention, making this one of the closest calls of his entire life. The infection was so advanced and dangerous that it required drastic treatment measures that went far beyond what anyone might expect for a dental problem. Doctors were forced to remove most of Gable's teeth to stop the infection from spreading further throughout his body, leaving the 32-year-old actor with almost no natural teeth remaining. But the medical crisis didn't stop there, because the infection had become so severe that it had also affected other parts of his body, requiring surgeons to remove his gallbladder as well to save his life. This medical emergency happened at one of the worst possible times for Gable's career, as he was scheduled to begin filming Dancing Lady the very next day after he was hospitalized. The production had to be completely shut down while he recovered, and MGM Studio had to spend an additional $150,000 because of the delays caused by his illness. Studio boss Louis B. Mayer was so angry about the cost overruns that he actually docked Gable 2 weeks of pay, even though the actor's illness was completely genuine and he wasn't faking it to avoid work. The recovery process was long and complicated, requiring Gable to take a vacation to Alaska and Canada with his wife while his gums healed enough for him to be fitted with a complete set of dentures. This dental work would become a permanent part of his life, and the dentures would later cause him problems with bad breath that his co-stars would sometimes complain about during intimate scenes. Fact 4. Vivien Leigh hated kissing him. Despite the passionate romance between Rhett Butler and Scarlett O'Hara that captivated millions of moviegoers, Vivien Leigh found the reality of filming those intimate scenes with Clark Gable to be far less romantic than audiences might imagine. The British actress was quite blunt about her experience kissing the leading man during the production of Gone with the Wind, openly complaining that his dentures smelled something awful and made their romantic scenes genuinely unpleasant to film. Leigh's candid comments about Gable's breath problems revealed an awkward behind-the-scenes reality that contrasted sharply with the glamorous image that Hollywood studios worked so hard to maintain. The bad breath issue wasn't something Gable could easily control or fix, because it was a direct result of the extensive dental work he'd undergone years earlier, when his severe gum infection required doctors to remove most of his natural teeth and replace them with a full set of dentures. The problem was made worse by the fact that dental technology in the 1930s wasn't nearly as advanced as it is today, which meant that dentures from that era often didn't fit as well and were much more likely to cause ongoing issues with oral hygiene. Additionally, Gable was a heavy smoker throughout his life, which certainly didn't help his breath situation and probably made the smell even more noticeable to his co-stars during those close-up romantic scenes. What makes this situation even more interesting is that Leigh wasn't the only actress who noticed and complained about Gable's halitosis problem. Other leading ladies who worked with him over the years also made similar comments about his breath, though most were more discreet about it than Leigh was. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on anyone involved in the production, since Gable's character was supposed to be irresistibly charming and romantic, while the actor himself was dealing with a very unglamorous personal hygiene issue that made intimate scenes challenging for everyone involved. Fact 5. Adolf Hitler wanted him captured alive. One of the strangest and most disturbing aspects of Clark Gable's World War II military service was the fact that Adolf Hitler himself had developed such an obsession with the Hollywood star that he offered a substantial reward to any German soldiers who could capture the American actor alive and bring him back to Germany unharmed. Hitler, who had been an aspiring artist in his youth and maintained a lifelong fascination with movies, considered Gable to be above all other actors and wanted him as a prized trophy of war. The German leader's plan for Gable was both bizarre and humiliating, as Hitler apparently intended to parade the captured movie star through Berlin and other German cities like some kind of exotic animal in a cage, using him for propaganda purposes to demonstrate Nazi superiority over American culture. Gable was understandably terrified by this prospect, and was only half joking when he told friends that if Hitler caught him, the dictator would put him in a cage like a gorilla and send him on a tour of Germany for the entertainment of Nazi supporters. This threat was serious enough that it created real concerns among Gable's military superiors, who worried that having such a high-profile target in their ranks could put their entire bombing group at greater risk during combat missions. The bounty on Gable's head meant that German forces would be specifically looking for him during air battles, and his presence could potentially compromise the safety of other crew members who might become targets simply because they were flying with the famous actor. Hermann Göring, who was in charge of the German Air Force, even issued specific orders related to capturing Gable, showing just how seriously the Nazi leadership took this bizarre celebrity obsession. The reward offer made Gable's already dangerous job as an aerial gunner on bombing missions over Europe even more perilous, as enemy fighters would have extra motivation to try to force his aircraft down rather than simply shooting it out of the sky. Fact 6. Extreme germophobia. Despite bad breath. Clark Gable had one of the most contradictory personal hygiene situations in Hollywood history, combining an almost obsessive need to keep his body clean with a persistent breath problem that he seemed unable to control. The actor showered multiple times every single day, changed his bed sheets daily, and changed his clothes frequently throughout each day. Yet he suffered from terrible halitosis that made intimate scenes uncomfortable for his leading ladies and became one of the worst-kept secrets in Hollywood. His cleaning habits were so extreme that people who knew him well described it as a genuine fetish that went far beyond normal personal hygiene routines. Gable absolutely refused to take baths because he found the idea of sitting in water that contained dirt from his own body to be completely disgusting, which meant he only cleaned himself by taking showers where the dirty water would immediately wash away. This bath phobia was so strong that he once asked a friend how he could possibly tolerate sitting in a tub with all that dirt coming off of him. The contradiction between his obsessive cleanliness and his bad breath problem created an ironic situation that seemed to puzzle even Gable himself. Despite all his efforts to maintain perfect hygiene in every other area of his life, the halitosis issue persisted because it was caused by his dentures, which were a permanent part of his life after his severe dental problems in the early 1930s. No amount of showering or clean clothes could fix the fundamental problem with his mouth, which was a result of the dental technology and oral care methods available at that time. His Army roommate John Mahan witnessed this extreme cleanliness obsession firsthand and described how Gable would meticulously maintain his personal hygiene routine even in military conditions. Mahan noted that Gable's attention to staying clean was unlike anything he had ever seen, and the actor would go to great lengths to avoid anything he considered dirty or contaminated, making his persistent breath problems all the more frustrating for someone so focused on personal cleanliness. Fact 7. Built his own portable shower. When Clark Gable enlisted in the Army Air Forces during World War II, his extreme obsession with staying clean led him to create one of the most unusual pieces of personal equipment any soldier had ever brought to military service. Unable to tolerate the standard washing facilities available to most servicemen, Gable actually bought parts and hardware to build his own jerry-rigged portable shower that he could carry with him wherever his military duties took him, ensuring he would never have to go without his multiple daily showers, even in wartime conditions. This makeshift shower contraption demonstrated just how far Gable was willing to go to maintain his cleanliness standards, even when serving alongside thousands of other soldiers who had to make do with whatever basic washing facilities the military provided. His fellow servicemen were amazed by the lengths he would go to in order to avoid what he considered unsanitary conditions, and the portable shower became legendary among the men who served with him during his time in England with the 351st Bombardment Group. But Gable's cleanliness obsession didn't stop with the portable shower, as he also took the unusual step of shaving off all his chest hair and armpit hair to prevent excessive sweating and the body odors that came with it. When his Army roommate John Mahan asked him about this strange grooming habit, Gable explained that he couldn't stand having excess hair because it made him smell and caused him to sweat more than he could tolerate, showing just how intensely he focused on preventing any kind of body odor or uncleanliness. This level of attention to personal hygiene was considered extremely unusual for a man in the 1940s, when most men didn't shave anything beyond their faces, and it definitely set Gable apart from his fellow soldiers. His roommate Mahin described Gable's behavior as a genuine cleanliness fetish that went far beyond normal hygiene practices, making him one of the most meticulously clean soldiers in the entire Army Air Forces. Fact 8. Nearly died from 20 mm shell. On August 12, 1943, during a dangerous bombing mission over Germany, Clark Gable came within inches of losing his life in one of the most terrifying close calls of his entire military service. While flying as an aerial gunner aboard a B-17 Flying Fortress nicknamed Ain't It Gruesome, Gable had positioned himself behind the top turret gunner to get a better view for the combat footage he was filming, completely unaware that he was about to experience a brush with death that would haunt him for the rest of his life. During the intense air battle over German territory, enemy anti-aircraft fire was exploding all around their bomber when a 20mm shell suddenly crashed through the flight deck of the aircraft with tremendous force. The shell struck so close to where Gable was crouched that it actually removed the heel from his shoe, tearing away part of his footwear as it passed by him. at incredible speed before exiting the aircraft just 30 centimeters from his head without exploding. The most terrifying aspect of this near-death experience was that Gable had no idea how close he had come to being killed until after the bombing mission was over, and the crew had safely returned to their base in England. It wasn't until he was examining his damaged shoe and the other crew members were inspecting the shell holes in their aircraft that he realized the 20mm round had missed taking his head off by less than 12 inches, a distance so small that even a slight movement in the wrong direction would have been fatal. What made this incident even more remarkable was that the shell failed to explode when it struck the aircraft, which was incredibly fortunate since an exploding 20mm round at that close range would have killed not only Gable but potentially several other crew members as well. The unexploded shell had essentially threaded the needle between Gable's body and the aircraft structure, creating one of the most miraculous survival stories of his entire war service. Fact 9. Gave away his only Oscar. In one of the most heartwarming and generous gestures in Academy Award history, Clark Gable gave away his only Oscar statue to a young child who had admired it, showing a level of humility and kindness that was rarely seen among Hollywood's biggest stars. After winning the Academy Award for Best Actor in 1935 for his performance in It Happened One Night, Gable encountered a child who was fascinated by the golden statue and clearly impressed by the prestigious award that represented the highest honor in the film industry. Rather than keeping the Oscar as a trophy to display in his home like most actors would do, Gable made the spontaneous decision to give the statue to the child, explaining his reasoning with words that revealed his down-to-earth attitude toward fame and success. He told the boy that it was the winning of the award that had mattered to him, not actually owning the physical statue itself, showing that he valued the recognition and honor more than having a golden trophy to show off to visitors or use as a conversation piece. This generous act demonstrated Gable's genuine character and his ability to connect with people of all ages, even at the height of his fame, when he was considered one of the most important actors in Hollywood. The gesture was particularly meaningful because It Happened One Night had been such a significant breakthrough in his career, marking the moment when he truly became a major star and proving that he could carry a film as the leading man rather than just playing supporting roles or villains. The story has a touching ending that shows how much this gesture meant to both Gable and the child who received it. After Gable's death in 1960, the child, who had grown up and kept the Oscar all those years, made the decision to return the statue to Gable's family, completing a circle of generosity that had begun with the actor's spontaneous act of kindness decades earlier. Fact 10. Secret daughter, hidden for decades. One of Hollywood's biggest cover-ups involved Clark Gable and actress Loretta Young, who managed to hide their secret daughter from the public for decades through an elaborate deception that fooled fans, reporters, and even the child herself. During the filming of Call of the Wild in 1935, Gable and Young had an affair that resulted in Young becoming pregnant, creating a scandal that could have destroyed both their careers if it had become public knowledge at the time. The situation was particularly complicated because Gable was married to his second wife, Maria Langham, when the affair happened, making it impossible for him to acknowledge the child without creating a massive public relations disaster for both actors. Young, who was known for her strong Catholic faith and moral public image, faced an even bigger problem since having a child out of wedlock would have completely destroyed her reputation and likely ended her career in an era when Hollywood had strict moral codes for its stars. Young's solution was to disappear from public view for several months, claiming she was taking time off for health reasons while she secretly gave birth to a daughter named Judy Lewis in 1935. After keeping the baby hidden for nearly 2 years, Young then staged an elaborate fake adoption, bringing the child home and telling everyone that she had decided to adopt an orphaned baby girl, creating a cover story that successfully fooled the media and the public. The deception was so complete that Judy Lewis herself didn't learn the truth about her real parentage until she was an adult, just before her own wedding, when Young finally revealed that Clark Gable was her biological father. Lewis grew up looking remarkably similar to Gable, with his distinctive large ears and facial features, which made the family resemblance obvious to anyone who looked closely, but the adoption story was never questioned publicly during Gable's lifetime, and he never acknowledged Lewis as his daughter. Fact 11. Crashed the undershirt industry. One of the most unexpected consequences of Clark Gable's star power came from a single scene in It Happened One Night that allegedly had such a massive impact on American men's fashion that it nearly destroyed an entire industry overnight. In the famous undressing scene where Gable's character prepares for bed, in the same room as Claudette Colbert's character, he removes his shirt to reveal that he's wearing nothing underneath, showing his bare chest instead of the undershirt that most men typically wore during the 1930s. This moment created what became known as one of the most powerful examples of celebrity influence on consumer behavior in American history, as men across the country reportedly stopped buying undershirts because they wanted to copy Gable's masculine style from the movie. The scene was particularly impactful because it challenged the standard men's fashion of the era, when wearing an undershirt beneath your regular shirt was considered proper and necessary for most well-dressed men, making Gable's bare-chested approach seem rebellious and sophisticated. The practical reason behind this wardrobe choice had nothing to do with making a fashion statement, as the decision was purely about filmmaking logistics and keeping the scene moving smoothly. Director Frank Capra and the wardrobe department found that having Gable remove both his shirt and an undershirt would slow down the pacing of the scene and make the undressing sequence feel awkward and clunky, so they simply eliminated the undershirt to make the moment flow better on screen. While the story of undershirt sales plummeting across America has become one of Hollywood's most famous legends about the power of movies to influence popular culture, fact-checking websites have noted that this tale should be taken with some skepticism, since concrete evidence of the actual sales decline is difficult to verify. However, the story has persisted for decades as an example of how a single movie moment could allegedly change an entire industry and reshape American men's fashion habits. Fact 12. 500. Zero gun collection. When Clark Gable died in 1960, one of the most surprising discoveries in his estate was an extensive gun collection that was valued at $500,000, which would be worth several million dollars in today's money, and represented one of the most impressive private firearms collections owned by any Hollywood star. Gable had turned an entire room in his house into a dedicated gun room that was filled with an extraordinary assortment of weapons, including gold-inlaid revolvers, expensive shotguns, and custom rifles that he had collected over many years of his successful acting career. This massive collection reflected Gable's genuine passion for hunting and outdoor activities, which had been a major part of his public image ever since MGM started promoting him as a rugged, masculine leading man in the early 1930s. The studio had originally created publicity photos of Gable holding fishing equipment and shotguns while wearing flannel shirts to establish his outdoorsy persona, but what started as a marketing strategy had actually tapped into his real interests and hobbies that he pursued enthusiastically throughout his life. The gun collection included many rare and valuable pieces that went far beyond what most hunting enthusiasts would own, featuring custom-made weapons and limited production firearms that were no longer being manufactured by the time of his death. Some of the guns were decorated with gold inlays and other expensive ornamental work that made them as much works of art as functional weapons, showing that Gable appreciated both the craftsmanship and the practical aspects of fine firearms. Gable's interest in guns and hunting was so well known in Hollywood that he often went on hunting trips with other actors like Gary Cooper, Fred MacMurray, and Robert Stack, who shared his enthusiasm for outdoor sports and marksmanship. He owned a hunting lodge in California, where he would retreat from the pressures of his movie career, and his gun collection was an essential part of the outdoor lifestyle that provided him with relaxation and escape from his demanding work in the film industry. Fact 13. Hated Gone with the Wind. In one of Hollywood's greatest ironies, Clark Gable absolutely hated the movie that would become his most famous and enduring role, dismissing Gone with the Wind as nothing more than a woman's picture that he had no interest in making. When producer David O. Selznick first approached him about playing Rhett Butler in the epic Civil War romance, Gable was completely resistant to the idea and made it clear that he thought the story was too focused on romance and female characters to be worth his time or effort. Gable's initial rejection of the role was based on his belief that the movie would appeal primarily to female audiences and wouldn't showcase the kind of masculine, action-oriented characters that had made him famous in films like Red Dust and It Happened One Night. He was particularly concerned that playing a romantic lead in such an obviously female-centered story would damage his reputation as a tough, no-nonsense leading man who appealed to male moviegoers as much as he did to women. The actor was so opposed to taking the role that it took overwhelming public pressure and fan demand to finally convince him to change his mind and accept the part of Rhett Butler. Movie fans across America had read Margaret Mitchell's best-selling novel and were absolutely convinced that Gable was the only actor who could possibly bring the roguish Southern gentleman to life on screen, creating such a groundswell of public opinion that it became impossible for him to continue refusing the role. Even after he agreed to play Rhett Butler, Gable remained reluctant about the project and was determined to preserve his masculine screen image by refusing to play the character as too romantic or sentimental. He insisted on avoiding a Southern accent for the role and made sure that his portrayal maintained the tough, slightly cynical edge that had made him popular with audiences, rather than turning Rhett into the kind of swooning romantic hero that he felt would be wrong for his established persona. Fact 14. Desegregated the film set. During the filming of Gone with the Wind in 1938, Clark Gable took a courageous stand against racial segregation when he discovered that separate whites-only and colored-only bathroom facilities had been set up on David O. Selznick's movie set, creating a situation that outraged the actor and led to one of the most principled moments of his entire career. When Gable learned about the segregated restrooms, he immediately marched to director Victor Fleming and delivered an ultimatum that left no room for negotiation or compromise. Gable's response was both direct and powerful, as he told Fleming in no uncertain terms that if the segregation signs didn't come down immediately, then the production didn't have a Rhett Butler, effectively threatening to walk away from what would become the most successful and important film of his career. This was an extraordinarily brave stance for any Hollywood star to take in 1938, when segregation was still legally enforced throughout much of the American South, and challenging racial discrimination could seriously damage an actor's career and box office appeal. The segregation issue was particularly meaningful to Gable because he had developed a close friendship with Hattie McDaniel, the African-American actress who played Mammy in the film and would go on to become the first black performer to win an Academy Award for her supporting role. Gable had known McDaniel before they worked together on Gone with the Wind, and he had specifically wanted her to be cast in the role, making the idea of her being treated as a second-class citizen on his movie set completely unacceptable to him. The confrontation worked exactly as Gable intended, and the segregation signs were immediately removed from the set, allowing all cast and crew members to use the same facilities regardless of their race. This action demonstrated Gable's personal integrity and his willingness to use his star power to fight against injustice, even when taking such a stand could have created serious problems for the production and his own career. Fact 15. Inspired Superman's name. Clark Gable's influence on popular culture extended far beyond movies and into the world of comic books, where he served as the direct inspiration for one of the most famous fictional characters in American history. When comic book creators Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster were developing Superman in the 1930s, they chose to name the superhero's mild-mannered civilian identity Clark Kent by combining Clark Gable's first name with the last name of actor Kent Taylor, creating a character name that would become instantly recognizable to millions of people around the world. The choice to use Gable's name wasn't accidental or random, as Siegel and Shuster were huge fans of the actor and wanted their superhero's alter ego to embody some of the same masculine appeal and charisma that made Gable such a popular leading man in Hollywood. By giving Superman the first name Clark, they were hoping to tap into the same kind of all-American charm and strength that audiences associated with Gable's screen persona, even though the comic book character would be portrayed as a shy, bumbling reporter rather than a confident movie star. But Gable's impact on popular entertainment didn't stop with Superman, as he also inadvertently inspired one of the most famous animated characters in cartoon history through a single scene in It Happened One Night. In the movie, there's a memorable moment where Gable's character leans against a fence while rapidly eating carrots and talking with his mouth full, creating a casual, nonchalant pose that caught the attention of animators at Warner Brothers Studios, who were working on their new cartoon rabbit character. The animators were so impressed by Gable's carrot-eating scene that they decided to make eating carrots the signature habit of their new character, Bugs Bunny, and they copied the relaxed, confident way that Gable leaned and gestured while munching on the vegetables. This connection means that every time Bugs Bunny asks, "What's up, Doc?" while chomping on a carrot, he's actually channeling a bit of Clark Gable's screen presence from his Academy Award-winning performance in the 1934 romantic comedy,